Hello there, and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer, and on this occasion I am joined by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello.
And you know what happens when the Alexander Petrov and Ruslan Bosharov of the Terrace get together. That's right, we're going to pitch away your doorstep with a women's perfume bottle full of lower league Scottish football, poison you, and then when we're investigated by the police, we'll just tell them that all we were doing was visiting the famous 123-metre spire of the Salisbury Cathedral.
That's all you need to do. That's all you need to do. A good excuse will always get you off.
Exactly. Just two middle-aged men just out and about in the sort of the suburbs. It's fine. It's really not an issue. It's really not an issue.
An unlikely scenario in any case. Never mind a case that may involve the poisoning of a man ultimately,
and his daughter, I think.
What did she get? Did she get poisoned?
Yeah, you know something. All I wanted to get the Wikipedia page was the name of the two culprits. I wasn't really looking for anything else. Maybe do that next week. They'll use the man and his daughter as the...
I've only really seen pictures of him looking really upset in his hospital bed, and rightly so, I suppose.
Of course, Novichok, it's certainly no laughing matter. But enough about man-made poisons. Shaughan and I are going to be doing a bit of a grab bag this episode. It's a bit of a patented 3-game podcast come grab bag. There wasn't a full fixture card for us to examine, but there was just enough for us to talk about. 2 games in the SPFL, one from the Championship, another from League 2. And the 4th round of the SPFL Trust Trophy, and we'll probably focus on the only interesting game there, the Airdrieonians won, East Kilbride won. So effectively, it's just nibbling at the sides of the cup games.
Let's face it, it's all we can do in this circumstance. Yeah,
it's not so much nibbling. We are going to have it's a 3-course meal, but we're ordering a lot of bread to go alongside it. So that's what you're getting from this podcast. But first up, Shaughan, are you well? You all good?
I am very well. How are you?
Yeah, very good, very good. I had a nice night. We're recording this on the Wednesday. A really nice night at the Scotland-Portugal game last night, and a nice interaction where, if anyone knows the geography of the bowels of Hampden, I host the event for the Scottish Business Club where you interview former Scotland players in front of a hospitality audience, and it's great fun. I've been doing it for a couple of years now. Really, really enjoyed doing it. But when I finished up for the evening, must have been about 20 past 10, you leave, it takes place in the Hampden Museum, you leave the Hampden Museum and then you walk past where the Players' Families Lounge is and then go upstairs to the main reception. So the Players' Families Lounges, directly beneath that are the changing rooms. So the players will get changed, washed, and they'll come up a flight of stairs and go and see their families. Like one time, there was a wee boy who was outside waiting to get players' autographs. I ended up speaking to him, and when I was speaking to him, Billy Gilmore walked past and straight in. He'd been waiting all night for him, and I distracted him. So I felt really bad about that. But this night, obviously, with Nicky Devlin getting on as for the final 5 or 6 minutes, I was absolutely ecstatic about that. I was absolutely delighted for him, like proper standing up, clapping my hands. Probably the most I cheered all game because I was just so pleased for him. But when I was leaving, there was an older guy who had he was sort of cradling a wee boy, standing outside the lounge. All these other wee boys waiting for the players' autographs, and this older guy standing cradling a wee boy. The boy must have been about like 2, probably 2.5, something like that. And I was walking by, I caught a look at the wee boy's jersey. It's like Devlin 22. So I said to the guy, the older guy, not the child. I said to the guy, listen, this is strange. Are you Nicky Devlin's dad? And he's like, aye. I said, like, well, my name's Craig. Like, I'm a Stennismuir supporter. I remember watching him for like 10 years ago. I really liked him, and it's just amazing to see him like kick on in his career. And it was great talking to his dad. His dad must have gone through a whole range of emotions in his eyes. He just tells you how delighted he was that his son had from having played like started amateur level with Drumchapel before moving to Dumbarton. To go from that, there can't be many players nowadays that play amateur football and go on to represent Scotland. And just to see that, it was amazing. And I was chatting with a part of me was thinking, it'd be nice to see Nicky and that and say all right to him. But I thought, no, this isn't my moment. This is a moment for his for his dad and his son, and it's just a great moment. A great moment. So proud of him, and I can't imagine there was a prouder person in the whole of the country last night than Nicky Devlin's dad. So yeah, that was really nice. That was really nice.
No, that's class. That's really, really good. And it's funny because so last night I thought I had a similar moment, but actually eventually I didn't think I did. So I have terrible seats, right? So like we're kind of third row, kind of next to the corner flag at the goal that Portugal were attacking in the second half.
So David Gray corner.
So see the same side that Devlin kind of had that block.
Right, got you.
That's the side. That's the side I'm closest to. But see about maybe like I don't know, 8 feet to my right, there was a guy who seemed really committed and really passionate about everything Tony Ralston did, to the point where I was like, I think this guy might be like related to Tony Ralston. Maybe it's his brother. And I was trying to look at him. I was trying to look at his hair. I was trying to look at his face. I goes, does he look a bit like him? Maybe it's his brother, whatever. And then even when Ralston went off, like see when Ralston kind of crumpled and fell backwards. Yeah. And then he went off, and even at that point he seemed a bit concerned. And then he was shouting over, and then Ralston went off. Sorry, kind of gave a thumb up, and I was like, did he give a thumb up to this guy here? But then oddly, see when Devlin came on, the guy seemed totally passionate about Nicky Devlin. I was like, wait a minute.
Just loves right backs.
He just loves right backs. Is he related to Ralston and Nicky Devlin? It just seemed somebody who loved right back. So I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't see necessarily any comparisons, whether it was hair, face, he didn't have a name or whatever in the back of his jersey. This man just loved right backs. But fair play to him. He was enjoying his evening.
Good, and there's a podcast as well about the game that has just dropped. I think, not exactly sure who recorded it, but hopefully it was one of the good ones, because it's always good to hear about Scotland when one of the good ones is involved. Not so good when one of the more mediocre ones. I feel like Brendan Rodgers have got 3 names in an envelope here. Make sure your name is not in one of these envelopes. But Shaughan, before we get talking about the lower league action, I mean, this is a lower league podcast. If anyone's listening into this, if there's a Spartans fan that's tuning into this, what the fuck are they talking about Scotland for? Get to the football. We'll get there. But before we begin, something that sadly is an all too common occurrence these days is we have to begin the podcast with corrections and clarifications. So every week, people are getting in touch with Shaughan and I to let us know that we've been in the wrong. And there was no exception this time around. Now, Shaughan, normally when people get in touch, it's usually via social media. Somebody will reach out to you via a Twitter. Sometimes you get an Instagram comment. Sometimes in the Discord that gets relayed to you. I don't fish in that particular pond. I think the people that do are vile. This time, however, it was face-to-face criticism, which is unusual. I was on Friday night. I was at a house party, and I was talking to Graham Tate, who is an Ayr United supporter, long-time listener, watches A View from the Terrace as well. So he is terrace-pilled, I think it's fair to say. And he pulled me up for a comment that we made on last week's show. We were talking about Queen's Park having finished in second place in the 2022-23 championship. That was not the case. It was Ayr United who finished in second. That's right. They defeated Inverness Caledonian Thistle courtesy of Mark McKenzie's late goal that allowed them to leapfrog Queen's Park into second place. And it was the Spiders who finished in third. So that was a bit of an oversight on our part, and so we're sorry.
Well, that's fair. And you know something, now that you mention it, I had a face-to-face bumping into someone on Saturday, funnily enough. But it was one of those ones where I had my earphones in, and then somebody said something, and I took one out, and then they said something again, and I didn't quite catch it. And you know how you laugh, and then you go, yeah, that's right, yeah. And it's only when you start to walk away that you realise what they've said.
Yeah.
So it was, was it maybe 2 seasons ago, we said something about Cove Rangers, and either both of us, or probably just you, I'll probably just blame you, you said something about the fact that they had a Highland League defence.
Yes, that's right. The guys like Scott Ross, and to be fair, I mean, they could really be doing with that Highland League defence these days. And do you remember we got that? Somebody tweeted us and gave us a wee bit of criticism about it. Yes, it was an older guy. Was that the older guy?
Yeah.
Yes!
I bumped into him. I bumped into him on Saturday. So basically what happened was I was away for a walk, and I'd bought the stream for Partick Thistle Falkirk. I goes, I'm going to go into town and then I'm going to come back. And then somebody basically stopped me and said, am I going the right way to go to Firhill? I goes, listen, it's a good walk, but listen, straight up there, blah, blah, blah. And then, but I had my headphones in, and there's something about, I said, and then it was like Highland League Cove Defence. I was like, I'm not entirely sure what this guy's on about. I'll just smile, acknowledge it, and say, oh, yeah, right, and then laugh. And then it was only when I started to walk away, I was like, oh
Penny
no,
drops.
it's the guy that tweeted it. So I feel really bad. So if he's listening, apologies for not realising what you were talking about initially, but it was him.
I think, is it Ian McNeil? Is that the guy's name?
Oh, I don't know. Regardless, I hope he enjoyed Partick Thistle Falkirk on Saturday.
Ian, if you're listening, Shaughan should have sent you in the completely opposite direction for your cheek. No, but that's great. Thank you very much for listening, and thank you for holding a very specific grudge about a throwaway comment that we made on the podcast. It was just like we just didn't think Scott Ross was very good. That was it. That was it. No harm to the guy, but obviously they miss him. They could be doing with Scott Ross now. All's well that ends well.
He seemed very nice. He seemed very nice, to be fair.
Aye, even nicer if he was walking the opposite direction, like you sent him to Easterhouse instead.
Sent him to Pollock.
Now, enough about giving slanderers wrong directions. We'll kick off the show by looking at the sole fixture in the Championship. You've mentioned it already, Shaughan. This was a 1-1 draw between Partick Thistle and Falkirk at Firhill. Ethan Ross opened the scoring for the visitors just before the hour mark. Really nice goal this, but it was almost immediately cancelled out by Brian Graham with his first league goal of the season. Falkirk very slightly extended the lead at the top of the table over Ayr United, and Thistle, meanwhile, are 10 points behind them in 5th place. Now, on the face of it, a 1-1 draw, that looks like a pretty decent result for both sides. Going by the highlights, and a good highlights package that Falkirk always put out, going by highlights, this was a pumping. This was a sterile pumping. And if Falkirk had won this about 4-1, I don't think there'd be any complaints here.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably a fair enough summary of the game. I tell you what I would say. So I as I said, I bought the stream, and let's face it, you and myself, we have listened, bought, watched a number of club streams over the last, whatever it is, 5 or 6 years, and some of them are great, and some of them are less so. And there is a number of packages that have bugged us, and whether it's to do with maybe no commentators, whether it's to do with commentators are particularly biased or get things wrong or whatever. This might be the first one that was really annoying me because the co-commentator was so negative about Partick Thistle. Like, see if you'd switched this on for whatever reason at 3:30 and there was no score in the top left-hand corner.
Yeah.
Judging by what he was saying, you would have presumed that Partick were 3-0 down.
So was this a Partick Thistle stream as well?
Yeah, sorry, there was a Partick Thistle stream. The main commentator was, I thought, very good. The co-commentator was just unbelievably negative, kind of irritatingly so. And you know, who was it? Guy Mowbray and Mark Lawrenson. Remember how they had a bit of a fallout? The
2010 World Cup.
Yes. So I did, and to be fair, I could be totally wrong here, but there was a couple of occasions where I did think that his negativity was just wearing down the kind of main commentator, and he was kind of being a wee bit snippy. But other than that, the package itself was very good at £12. But my goodness, the co-commentator was a wearily negative guy.
It's funny that club commentary. I do appreciate that you've got a job to do there, and you've got to call the action as it is. But I always think with club commentary, you don't want to be too smart. You have got an audience there, and you've got to tailor your comments accordingly. So if someone's playing poorly, you can't. Something we've probably learned from doing a View from the Terrace, you can't say, "Oh, this guy's shite." You'd say like, "He's haven't had the impact that perhaps people were expecting from." You know, you can kind of spin the language. So I'm really surprised to hear that a club, particularly a club of Partick Thistle stature, would have someone who's just being quite down.
Yeah, I suppose in his defence, Partick Thistle were second best on the day. And in terms of Thistle as a side, quite interesting in terms of the fact that I think defensively, and maybe fans of Falkirk and maybe fans of Livingston would disagree, but I think defensively, Partick are as good as you'll get in the Championship. Like if you look at certainly the back four, Harry Milne at left back, Kanaya Megwa at right back, Daniel O'Reilly and Lee Ashcroft centre half. That is a good, stable back four. I think as good as you'll get in the second tier. And I think what we have probably been critical of, and a lot of people have, not just you and me, in terms of the last couple of seasons with Partick Thistle, in that they've kind of stockpiled goalkeepers who are probably average for the Championship rather than good Championship goalkeepers. I do think in Miles Roberts He had a couple of really good saves. And I think that's been the story of his season. A very, very good goalkeeper. And actually, the goal that they conceded, a decent goal. Defence was caught a bit flat-footed, to be fair. But that's the first goal they've conceded in the league for Hull this season. So I do think that defensively, there's a lot going for them, and that gives them a kind of basis to kick on. The problem is, I think, in front of that, nothing's really working, and that's now the second time I've watched them for 90 minutes. Once at Starts Park, and once at Saturday. And I've watched a number of the highlights as well this season, and nothing seems to be happening at all in terms of chance creation, in terms of kind of closing down the opposition. It just feels from the middle to front, nothing is working. Well,
you're not the only person that thinks that. I presume you've read Brian Graham's interview in the Herald following the game.
So I've only seen a couple of quotes, but he was suggesting that he's not getting enough chances. Is that right?
He's not. The team aren't creating for him. He says, I can't remember exactly what he said, but it's like, I'm a 6 yard. You put the balls into the 6 yard box, I can attack them and I can score them, and the team haven't been doing that.
And so I saw that quote. I didn't see the entire interview, so I was wary of taking comments out of context. But I did wonder how that would go down at the club. But bear in mind, I only seen that one comment and didn't necessarily see the overall interview, because I know Chris Doolan has said something about the fact that he, and again, maybe there was just a bit of, you know how people can go and pine Bovril and make something out of something that isn't really there, I suppose. But I believe Chris Doolan has said in the last couple of weeks that he felt that they were creating chances, but they just weren't finishing them. Whereas I suppose Brian Graham was suggesting that actually just weren't creating chances. So it feels like there's a difference of opinion there. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. But I know it feels like it's like fans are maybe suggesting that there is something there, but maybe there isn't.
Yeah, on that, I obviously read that somebody shared it on social media, so I read Brian Graham's interview, and if you look at the worst aspects of it, like, I'm not scoring goals because the team aren't creating enough chances for me. It's part of a wider interview, and he basically said we need to stop playing like individuals and start playing as a team, and he included himself in that. Now, were you on the episode of View for the Terrace when Brian Graham was on? Did you on that one?
No, but I did watch it. I thought it was very good.
So it was class. It was really good. And it's a shame you weren't there, because having got the chance to spend like about an hour and a bit in his company, like very forthright, doesn't really hold anything back. And I imagine he's the same in the dressing room. I imagine he's the same when he's at training. I imagine he's a very prominent voice. So I don't think that he'd be saying anything in public that he's not saying, that hasn't already been addressed, that hasn't been addressed through the week, and he was just like, it's a culmination of frustrations. I saw people saying it's like on Pine Bovril, like he'd be leading a coup against Doolan, but I just don't think that's the case. I think it's just someone coming out and just annoyed that they've gone from like being one of the top scorers in the lower leagues last season for like 9 games in, and that's his first league goal. But it's a very well taken goal as well. It's a really good shot. I didn't think Hogarth had a chance to save it because of how well placed it was. But I can see where he's coming from. But then he's able to look at himself. There was a chance in this game for Keelan Adams when he hit the post. Graham's the one that's marking him, and just switches off, and Adams is able to go in and have a shot on the outside of the post. So I mean, it's one thing if you're going to be critical of others, turn the lens inwards, and I've no doubt that Graham's do that. You don't play for as long as you have and go into coaching, and especially coaching. I'm going to assume there's big differences between coaching women's football and coaching men's football, and how you talk to players. I think that's one of the big things. It's, God, I don't want to sound like your dad here, but it's a lot more like a compliment sandwich, I imagine, than giving people like all out bollockings. And I hope people know what I mean by that, rather than just thinking like I'm being a big sexist or that. Because I hope that, God, I keep talking. The more I keep talking, the worse I sound. But I think there's a degree of like, you don't get that unless you have that self-reflection. And I think that he has, and knows that his contribution isn't enough, and he hasn't been playing well in recent weeks. So it's one thing, the team not creating chances, but Graham's probably got to do a wee bit better himself.
And I would agree as well, and I do think that Partick are in a really weird situation where any time, and this probably goes now for, maybe it's been 2 or 3 summers, where every time they look to recruit a forward, they're essentially saying to them, hi there, would you like to join Partick Thistle You won't start unless Brian Graham's injured, but you might get 20 minutes. Like that feels like that does feel like quite a hard sell.
The Harry Kane problem, like trying to sign another striker at Tottenham Hotspur when he was there.
And I know it seemed to work. Like last season, like Adeloy seemed quite comfortable with that, and actually had a pretty good record in terms of whether it was starting games or whether it was coming off the bench. I think is it Ablade this season, but he's injured. I must admit, I do think as much as Chris Doolan has said that he, or certainly maybe said a week or two ago that he felt they were creating chances. I don't think they're. I'm not saying that Brian Graham has had a kind of stellar season so far, because I don't think he has. But I do think the bulk of the issue does lie between the defence and the forward line, and I think that's partly injuries. Like that, they do have key players that are out there.
Stephen Lawless is missing.
Lawless, for example. But even players that have come in, so Kyle Turner, for example, I know he took a wee bit of time to get up to speed at Wraith Rovers. Hasn't really hit the ground running at Firhill, and it's interesting in terms of something like Logan Chalmers. Like I think if you'd spoken to people who had to watch Championship football, whether it was go to games or even just watch games on a Friday night, they would say, "Oh yeah, Logan Chalmers is a good player. That feels like a good signing." But funnily enough, if you've spoken to Ayr United fans, there might have been a kind of 50-50 split in terms of would we like to see him at Ayr United again this season, or would we be happy for him to kind of move on? And again, it feels like his good moments. And let's face it, when Logan Chalmers has a good game, he's exceptional. But it just feels like those moments are far too fleeting. And at this moment in time, he hasn't been. It doesn't feel like he's been a good signing so far, anyway. So I do feel that the issue is in middle of the park with Partick Thistle at this moment in time. The problem is with Chris Doolan, obviously is a kind of legendary player, done well I think last season, so still has credit in the bank. But I do think the longer this run goes on, because it's not just that they're not getting wins, like they're not playing particularly eye-catching football or exciting football, and there's already kind of murmurings, I suppose, about is he the right man to take them forward?
Yeah, I watched his post-match interview, and he said, I probably actually disagree with something that you said, and this ties on what he said. He said they look strong defensively, and it said it would take a lot to break them down. I'm going to disagree with this. Like Falkirk, it's interesting how McGuigan has handled the absence of Ross McKeever, to the point that we make pretty much every time we talk about Falkirk's attack on this podcast. We always say that Ross McKeever's not the best player, probably the most important player in how he knits that attack together. And the deputies and like Gary Oliver, Mikey McKenna, Ryan Shanley probably aren't good enough. For this game, however, he went with Gary Oliver as a false nine.
Yep.
And that's something that Doolan said in his post-match interview. He said they were really difficult to pin down, especially particularly in the first half, because if Gary Oliver's going to drop deep to support the midfield, then you've got Ethan Ross, who continued his good form. He can sort of move into the middle. Calvin Miller can do it. Aidan Nisbet is someone that is capable of pushing high up. So it's incredible just to think like John McGuigan is just playing this sort of like a 4-6-0 formation. It's brilliant stuff, man. Brilliant stuff. But any time that Falkirk attacked them, it looked like they were going to score. I think like Harry Milne, a player who I really like. Anytime Aguiman got a run on him, it looked like he was panicking. There were overloads, they weren't getting the support. Kabayo Megwa, great player, brilliant for Airdrieonians last season, arguably the best fullback in the division last term. But he switches off for it's a really nice for the goal. It's a really nice clipped ball from Aidan Nisbet, but Megwa's like facing the wrong way, and he's not seeing that Ross is running off over his shoulder, and they just look quite easy to play against. And it's just the wonders of, I don't necessarily think McKeever was missed here. I just think it was just like bad luck on Falkirk's part that you just don't quite have your shooting boots on, and the goalkeeper's in good form. But Falkirk had so many chances to score, so they did look quite easy to get at. And just if you're not scoring and you look quite easy to get at, that's when you're worried.
But I don't know if Thistle are easy to get at. I just think that Falkirk going forward are just a very, very good championship side. Like, so see, in terms of what Doolan said, in terms of like being difficult to break down, but then you're right. He also said about the fact that they get there was like kind of overloaded on each side, and do you let them go or do you double up? Or you could tell that he was struggling to comprehend how you defend against that Falkirk side, even after the game, I suppose. But you're right in terms of the fact that they have pace on each side in terms of Ethan Ross, Calvin Miller, then deep you have Dylan Tate that's happy to, that's technically great.
See that, sorry, just to interrupt you there, see that pass that he clipped in for Aidan Nisbet, he completely just, that side roll pass, completely I think it took two players out of the game with that pass, and it's, I think Nisbet snatched at the shot and it went past the post, but lovely stuff.
I do think that Falkirk give you a test that nobody else in the league will do in terms of pace out wide, technically good players in the middle of the park, and yes, they maybe didn't have the normal focal point in terms of Ross McKeever. It probably gives you a wee bit more to deal with, but still, in terms of Gary Oliver and Aidan Nisbet, there was still, like, that still gave you a problem. I think on a normal Saturday, that maybe doesn't happen for Thistle, but on Saturday they struggled and just about got away with it. I think about the last kind of 15-20 minutes, and I think this was, and again, you can probably say this about most teams in the Championship, in terms of both substitutes benches, they probably didn't have quite enough coming off it, and you can say this about most Championship teams in terms of squad depth, and at that point, it was only maybe the last 15 minutes where the game got a wee bit stretched, and Partick Thistle had not necessarily chances, but suddenly they were running at the kind of Falkirk back line. You thought, they might get a kind of undeserved winner here, but no. I mean, a 1-1 draw. You listen to John McGuigan afterwards, and he was absolutely right. They far better team, and as much as normally you would say 1-1 draw at Firhill, great, but ultimately they were disappointed the fact they didn't get all 3 points. And the other thing I was going to say about Ethan Ross, because I suppose it wasn't just over a year ago. I remember he came on at Firhill. I'd went to the 2-2 draw at Raith. At Firhill. Raith came back for a 2-0 deficit, and that was when I was quite critical of him, and it turned out I was sitting next to his family and I was mortified. Yeah. But the fact that he has went from being a hugely exciting player when he first arrived at Raith, and then just kind of tailed off through whether injury or poor form or whatever it is, and then to see him coming back, because he is, like, I don't know if you watched his interview, but he's just such like a kind of nice person. But he is now every bit as good. We speak about Dylan Tate, but how is now he's shown the same form that he had like 3 or 4 years ago. Ross is in the same boat. Again, he's been excellent.
It's interesting because if you were to write down Falkirk's best 11, I don't know if Ethan Ross would be in it. If you think about the wide players, you'd probably go for Miller and Morrison on either side. Probably. Again, interesting that John McGuigan brought up Callum Morrison. I don't know if he was suggesting he had an injury or an illness, but certainly been to the doctors, because I know Morrison had come back on the Tuesday against Livingston. McGuigan said that actually maybe that might have been a bit too quick, and he's had to go back to the doctors. But again, whatever is the issue with Morrison, hopefully he's back on the park soon. Definitely. And coming up, Shaughan, I think we've probably said as much as we can about this match. Up next, Partick Thistle are taking on Airdrieonians. Hamilton Accies against Falkirk. How do you see these games going?
I think that Falkirk will win quite comfortably. Where are Partick? Are they away from home?
5th. Oh, Firhill, sorry.
I think a narrow home win for Thistle.
Right, okay, I suppose if you're looking to bounce back, then Airdrieonians are probably a good side to do that against at the moment, and as we mentioned, they will come on and talk about their game against East Kilbride. Accies versus Falkirk.
I think Falkirk will win that comfortably.
Very good. There was no football in League One, but it was announced on Wednesday that Inverness, Caledonian Thistle have gone into administration. This is my notes. That hasn't happened. So...
I was like, what have I missed?
Yeah, sorry, I'd written these notes like over the weekend and last night, and I'd put this down preemptively because I know that the GoFundMe campaign and the bid to raise the £200,000 we're recording this on Wednesday the 16th of October, that money would effectively keep them going. They raised about 80,000?
80,000, I believe.
Which is all going to be kept by the club when they go into administration. I thought if you don't reach your targets, it gets refunded, but obviously not. Did you read? Did you read the articles in the Press and Journal about Scott Gardner?
I've seen a couple of quotes.
Excoriating. That's how I would describe them.
It doesn't put them in a good light at all.
Remember when we would record at Fowler's Flat in Pilton and have like 2 bottles of lager, and by the time the second one would kick in, you could really start slagging off Andy Muirhead and body all trolls. It was like that, but worse.
He does like to sue. So if it's not true, I'm sure we'll find out.
We are reporting on something else that's been reported. So if you do want to sue, first start with the Press and Journal and then start with Craig Fowler. Leave Shaughan, McGuigan and I out of this, please.
Work your way down.
Yeah, work your way down. And then he sues and then he comes for the pair of us. That's when we go all John Darwin on his ass and hide in a wardrobe. Move to Panama. That's just a very funny story. Think of if you'd gone to all that effort, why would you allow your photograph to be taken and put on a website for a Panamanian estate agent?
Actually, really annoys me.
Yeah,
there was a perfect, like, what everything they'd done up to that point was perfect. Yeah, take a picture and shove it on your website. Don't do that. Don't do that, John.
Would you prefer if we didn't, please? We're quite private people. And yeah, that's fine. That's fine. They could still be in Panama. Their sons wondering what happened to their dad. Now they don't speak to him.
The sons might have been happier.
Oh, great, our insurance bounty that's about to pay out now, that's been snatched away from them. Dreams of redecorating the kitchen, all up in smoke.
Even if you just put on, like, I don't know, a false moustache and a pair of glasses, anything but that.
You know what you should have done? Pose for the photograph whilst wearing a pair of glasses and false moustache. No one would have known. Now, we are going to sail away to League Two, into the capital, where Edinburgh City took on the Spartans at Meadowbank Stadium. It was the first meeting between the sides in 7 years, and it was the citizens who came out on top. Connor Young was the hero for the home side. He opened the scoring from the penalty spot, and he put the game beyond doubt at the end with a very lovely goal right at the death. And it actually was a pretty straightforward win for Edinburgh City. The victory's lifted them off the foot of the table. They're now in 7th place. And the Spartans, who had their captain, Kevin Waugh, sent off 10 minutes into the second half, and they're in 5th, just a point ahead. Now, Shaughan, I was at this game. This is your opportunity to ask me questions about a game of football from the weekend. Feel free.
I saw you posted a picture. You said, "Welcome to hell." It was raining heavily, and you were behind approximately 24 children. How was the day?
Well, it didn't get off to a great start, being caught in a cloudburst, and then behind like 40 kids all dressed in black. And they're all getting, there was only one steward working, they're all getting searched individually. I thought, fuck, I'm going to be here all day. I turned up at like 20 past as well, so I could get a seat up the back. Turned up there early and got stuck behind these boys, but then I'd prepaid for my ticket, so I was able to move into the prepaid line. So I was able to get in no bother.
I mean, in fairness, when it comes to Edinburgh, whether you're up the back or down the front, I mean, there's almost no difference whatsoever.
Honestly, that's what you think, Shaughan. That's what you think. I felt like I was watching football at the San Siro when I was able to sit in row 3 at Meadowbank Stadium. But I've got to say, man, I had a great time here. I had a brilliant time. This is one of the best games of football I've been to this season, and it was just brilliant for a number of factors. It was first and foremost a good game of football, a competitive game of football. But what made it so good, there's a real edge between the sides. And I mean, it didn't really spill off onto the pitch. It was generally quite a fair game, quite good nature and competitive. But certainly the fans that I was sitting near, they do not like the Spartans one bit. And then ultimately, to see a player, Connor Young's a really good player as well. Somebody who, I think he'll be away from Edinburgh at the end of this season. I think he'll move up a level. I think he can go and play in League One based on the couple of times I've seen him. But then just to see what it meant to those supporters at the full-time whistle, it just had a bit of everything. And ultimately that is, like, from rivalries to just seeing your team win, particularly against a team that you don't like. This game just had a bit of everything. I don't say it lightly, but I just felt like a privilege to get the chance to be there. I'm so glad that I was able to do so.
I know there is obviously the rivalry in general, but then obviously there was a suggestion that Spartans, was it 18 months ago, might have, I don't know, devoured Edinburgh?
Aye, there was the talk. I'm sure it was Tom Tracy, who was the guy who was putting money into Edinburgh at the time, had suggested that he could no longer, I think in his LinkedIn post, he said it was no longer viable to put money into a small club in the ongoing climate. And so they wanted to subsume the Spartans, become FC Edinburgh Spartans, something along those lines. And then the Spartans would effectively take Edinburgh's place, or that club would take the place in League One. That didn't happen, obviously. The Spartans getting promoted from the Lowland League put the kibosh in that. But the enmity goes back to, I think, when they were, local teams, so there's a rivalry there. But I think it goes back to when they were ground sharing. I don't know 100% know what the circumstances were or where it comes from, but it just goes, I think Edinburgh might have felt they were hard done by their landlords at that period. And then obviously there's I think if you had to say, like, the ideological differences between both sets of supporters as well. So there's these factors as well, why they don't like each other.
What do you mean by ideological?
There was the Edinburgh fans, if you hate the fucking Tories, clap your hands, was one of the songs that was being sung. I was trying to do it euphemistically. You knew exactly what I was talking about when I was talking about ideological differences.
I was just looking for some clarity.
You made me spell out. I think that's what it is. There's a perception. I'm going to assume these aren't my words. This is what I assume. There's a perception that the Spartans are seen as the wealthier, more bourgeois lower league club in Edinburgh compared to Edinburgh. So that's where it stems from. And a lot of the songs, like there's one they sang over and over again, like, as if you want to go to heaven when you die, if you want to go to heaven when you die, you must wear a city bonnet with "fuck the Spartans" on it if you want to go to heaven when you die, over and over and over and over again.
And was there a like obviously generally when there's a kind of derby, I suppose part of the fun is that there's a kind of back and forth between home fans and away fans. Was there a travelling support as such for Spartans?
It's funny, I was expecting to see like some of the Spartans like ultras there. Now I don't know if that's the case or if they're still associated with the football club or whatever, but there's certainly the Edinburgh City ultras. I was stuck behind them coming in, but they have their own wee bit. You've probably seen it on videos on YouTube or whatever. They've got just along from the home dugouts, there's a little portion next to the running track that's afforded to them where they can go and just bounce about and sing. And to be fair, they did it through the entire match. There was a terrible hailstorm. It was actually quite a nice day, but then a terrible hailstorm hit for us about 10 minutes. And all these young guys were just like stuck in the middle of it, but they never let up. They never stopped singing. And then you've got this. It's a very long stand. It feels like at Meadowbank. And so I was sitting towards the halfway line. I was sitting near some of the more vocal home supporters, including Ali Moncrief. I actually got speaking to him, who you've heard him when he does a podcast with Fowler. And he referenced, he said, like, a Clyde fan had mentioned this, when you see Craig Fowler's name come up on your phone, you just know it's bad news. It's like, Ali, every time Fowler message saying, can you do a podcast? I know exactly what you mean. Every time I hear from Fowler, it is bad news. But I was speaking to him there, and it was great to, like, I think he's been really good in the podcast. It was great to talk to him and get his thoughts on the game, and just seeing how much it meant to him, how excited he was. He was just saying, oh, just please fucking win. Don't care, just please fucking win. Please fucking win. So when the goals were going in, he was in my field of vision. So I wanted to see Edinburgh win as well, because like Big Eden Lynch plays for Edinburgh. And I quite like Michael McIndoe as well, you know. So
you're McIndoe pilled.
I've been McIndoe pilled. So I wanted to see Edinburgh win. And so when it was going on, if there was sing songs rusting out, I'd always kind of look to my left. That's where the noise, but just to see what Ali was doing. And then right down the other end of the stand, you had Spartans fans, but it was hard to discern. Mostly, it was guys who I'm going to assume were like community coaches there. They were all wearing like Spartans branded sports clothes that were monogrammed, with their initials on it.
Yep.
There didn't seem to be any punters there. I'm sure there were. I'm sure that I just wasn't aware of them. But mostly seemed to be the most visible ones were guys wearing the jackets. So there wasn't much singing coming from them. It was exclusively coming from the home support, and it wasn't so much like getting behind City. It was more like, fuck it, if you hate the fucking Spartans, clap your hands, all that sort of stuff.
I suppose maybe for the last, whatever it is, 18 months or a couple of years or whatever, we've always talked about Edinburgh to a degree in terms of, not necessarily going down, but been in bother, I suppose. But the Spartans are like potentially a club that is looking to move through the divisions. Is it now a case where it might be the opposite? And I don't mean literally, but in terms of we can now be positive about Edinburgh City and maybe a wee bit wondering where Spartans are going this season.
No, I think that's a really fair thing to say. We'll start with Edinburgh first of all. I think that they've got some, like, I think I've said it before, but I've seen them twice now, and they look a lot of fun to watch. The Spartans, they've got a pretty solid back four. You got Josh Grigor one side, John Robertson the other, and you got Eden Lynch and Lewis MacArthur in the middle. Now, like, Robertson's a really good football player. You know, I think he's been a midfielder most of his career, but he plays it right back and he plays the position really well. It's not like it's unfamiliar to him. He's played it at Alloa for a number of years, but he plays the position really well. Grigor is a good footballer, so I think the team is predominantly made up of footballers. The only guys who you're perhaps not as confident on the ball are Lynch and MacArthur, and they seem to see a lot of it because a lot of the play gets built up through the back. That's how McIndoe wants them to play. It's when you come into the middle of the park that things get really exciting. They've got a boy, Sam Jones, who, fun enough, was at the Spartans last season, just couldn't get a game for them because you had guys like Reece Armstrong, James Craig and so on ahead of him. Guys who are just better players. So Jones goes elsewhere, gets his opportunity, and he flourishes. And then further forward, you've got like Quinn Mitchell, who we've spoken about in Munich. And another good thing, so this is a total going off on a side tangent. One of the other reasons I went to this game was hoping to see Quinn Mitchell's dad apologise for him. And sure enough, when I'm walking to get a seat towards the halfway line, I get a shout in the crowd, and it's Quinn Mitchell's dad. So I was talking to him and catching up, and just listening. I was saying, I'm really sorry that I ruined your evening. I had too much to drink that night, but it was good. It was good seeing him. I think I'm hoping my apology was accepted as well. It was good to see him, and he should be really proud of Quinn's performance because he was really good in this game. Like Quinn Mitchell, Innes Lawson, James Stokes. James Stokes probably won't get the headlines compared to Connor Young, and this is something that Kirk Crichton, the assistant manager, said in his post-match interview. It's a lot of selfless running that he does, but that run has a purpose, and that opens up the space for Connor Young, who's just like a better player for him to score. And Young, like, if can't imagine he would be, but if Gary Naismith's listening, sign him for Stenny, because his skill set is something that team don't have. Just hard running, somebody who wants to just hang off the shoulder and just nip in behind, and a really good finish. I mean, that second goal, it was a really well taken goal. I think the issue that Edinburgh probably have, I think that McIndoe trusts that first 11, and I think when you go beyond that, I mean, just as an example, you see when the substitutes took place. There was one at half time, and then all the others came like in the 80th minute. And that some Spartans were able to do that was to bring on players midway through the game in the hope of changing the match. I think that they don't have much money to play with. So, said it before, McIndoe's probably gone big on Mark Weir, Lynch, Robertson, Connor Young. They're the guys he's probably put a bit of investment into, and the rest of the guys are probably playing for buttons. And I think that becomes even more difficult when if anything was happened to like Sam Jones, for instance, or anything happened to Young or Stokes, beyond that, you'd be like, this is a wee bit sticky here.
And I know we kind of tipped them at the start of the season for being, I mean, not just finishing 10th, but being a good bit behind everybody. How, bear in mind you've now seen them in the flesh on Saturday, how do you think they will actually get on this season now?
I suppose Michael McIndoe, an apology for that, because I completely underestimated him, completely underestimated his coaching. The fact that he's been able to wring quite a lot out of not very much. I think he should be really impressed. He should be really chuffed with himself. I think Ali Moncrief had said that he had, even going back to when he first took the job and knowing the financial difficulties, and he was straight away going into like the East of Scotland League and going into the Lowland League and looking at players that could step up. So he's done well. I think he's putting a lot of himself into this role. And I think if they can go injury free, then I think they could stay up. I think most Edinburgh City fans, if you gave them 9th place just now, they'd take it. And I think that will finish like 7th, 8th, 9th in that position. But based on the two games I've seen, I don't think they'll finish bottom. Because they're a good team. They are a good team.
Yeah, I've been pleasantly surprised by them. I suppose I've been unpleasantly surprised by Spartans, a team that it feels like they've got names in their squad, but they're not really given what we expect. I thought they would be thereabouts for the for the title, but it doesn't feel like that's going to be the case at all.
No, and again, to touch on Kirk Crichton's interview, and I was actually, Kirk Crichton seems like quite an interesting guy to listen to. I was actually disappointed it wasn't Michael McIndoe that was speaking. Because after you've just beaten your rivals and people are saying this is the best we've seen from an Edinburgh City team in the past 12 months since McIndoe has come in, that's the guy you would ultimately want to hear from in this instance. But one of the things that Crichton said he knew Spartans would be direct, and the players have to stand up for that, and that's something they did really well. Like Blair Henderson is like a come on and really get stuck into him. Not stuck in there. This is like we're looking forward to giving my paneling. We'll talk about him in a bit of detail shortly. But like he's a strong player, you know. He's if he's in the right positions, he can win flick-ons and all that sort of stuff, and he can bring other players into the game. So you've got to shove him about a bit. You've got to be prepared to have a wee bit of fight with him. And Lewis MacArthur did that. Lewis MacArthur, like, you know, the times when the ball's coming in and Henderson's like going like down, like he's arched his back to try and make himself strong, and you can see MacArthur just like kind of hold it and just waiting like he's springing so he can get over the top of him to head of the ball. A number of times that happened. It was like him and Lynch like were really solid at centre back, really solid at centre back. And we said it a number of times about Henderson, but if you're not scoring goals, you're not really contributing. Yeah. And on top of that, so you've got the key centre forward who's supposed to bring the other players into the game. Not necessarily saying this is all Henderson's fault, but no one really got into the game. You've got guys there like James Cragen, who you'd rate as a really solid like lower league midfielder, particularly in at that level. Just didn't really have much of an influence in the game. Hamish Ritchie had some nice touches, and there was a couple of balls, like his ability to kill like diagonals. You're like, oh, he looks really handy. Mm-hmm. But they didn't do enough to find him, and he didn't really go looking for it either. Mark Stowe, who's coming from Arbroath, didn't really see anything from him. They didn't bring Danny Denham on.
It occurred to me actually that even somebody who, like, I think he maybe played behind the striker, I don't know, you can maybe correct me, but like, remember at the start of the season, like Brogan Walls, it went from East Fife to Spartans, and like a lot of East Fife fans were A, a wee bit annoyed that he left East Fife, and B, annoyed that he left for another League Two team. Yeah, again, it didn't look like he, judging by the kind of very kind of brief highlights that I saw, and just in general this season, doesn't really feel like he's done very much.
No, I mean, I suppose the highlights, he's not someone that stood out, and then having gone to see him there, he didn't really stand out. I think it was just a day where nothing really went right for the Spartans. Like the first half was quite even. They seemed content to let Edinburgh have the ball, because Edinburgh want to pass it around a wee bit, and they're like Lewis MacArthur, Eden Lynch passing around, and these are probably the guys you can afford to give time on the ball to, because they're perhaps the poorest football players in that team. And then they came into it a wee bit. They were trying to find Ritchie, and they gave Edinburgh something to think about. But in that second half, where like it was a ball over the top to Innes Lawson to run onto, and Kevin Waugh like wipes him out. Yeah, and it's daft at that stage of the game. You're 10 minutes into the half. Like, if they're going to score, let them score, let the goalkeeper do something. You're still in the game, but don't get fouled.
Whatever you do, don't do that.
Don't foul him. Don't give away the penalty. Don't get yourself sent off, and then you're at a massive disadvantage. It was a wee bit funny that Blair Henderson had a good chance. The ball came over to him. I think he handled it to control it, but the referee didn't give it, and he shot, and Mark Weir got touched. It was like the reflexes. Mark Weir's a really good goalkeeper. There might be questions about his mobility and all that, but he flung up, and it hit his bicep and went out. It was one of those when you think that's going in, boom, arm goes up, and the ball's the way out. And I think with Edinburgh as well, because they have this alarming penchant for conceding goals in the final stage of the game, I think fans became quite nervy at that point, like when Spartans were just chucking balls, and even though they were a man down, they were seeing a lot of ball. Edinburgh just retreated slightly. I got a wee bit nervous, but then up the park, and it's just that Connor Young's goal, just great interplay. Like, I can't remember who rolled it off him, but his touch and the finish just to steer that ball low into the net. It's a great goal. It was a great goal. It was great to see. And I think I wrote this in Pie and Ball, and I might have said this. I've been critical of Edinburgh in the past, and be like, oh, what do you bring to the SPFL? Like, you've got tiny support, even relative to teams like Forfar, Montrose, or Stennismuir or Annan. Tiny support, you play at a crap ground, and I can't say anything positive about the ground. I'm sorry, I can't say anything positive about the ground. But seeing the supporters, like I mentioned, they're looking over at Ali at the full-time whistle, punching there and looking up, like seeing Dave, who was standing a wee bit along me, filming the game, seeing how much it meant to him, like just like shaking at joy. I get it. I get what they do, and it might be small. It might be small what they represent, but I get what they're here for. I get what they bring to the party. That's what I have become. That's my road to Damascus moment with Edinburgh City. I understand what you guys do. I understand what you're here for.
I don't know if you saw it as well. No, I haven't seen the original post. I only saw it. Might have been Ali actually that posted it on Pine Bovril. Seems to be some kind of maybe a response to a Q&A that Edinburgh have put out to the fans.
I saw that, yeah.
There seems to be some kind of hint. So they made no bones about the fact that fans are, let's face it, they are not happy at Meadowbank. They're not happy at the stadium and the kind of the experience that they get from that. But the final sentence was, I can't remember what it was. It might be something like, watch this space.
Stay tuned.
That was it. So that was interesting. So maybe there is something there about moving somewhere that is a better place to watch football.
There could be. I think it's in the club's best interest. It's very difficult to try and... You've been there, haven't you?
Yep.
Yeah, you've been there, so it's difficult. I mean, that probably game made it a bit special. The fact it was the first game in 7 years against your local rivals, and everyone's really up for it. But I think if that had been like a run-of-the-mill game against, I don't know, Forfar, for instance, you'd have really struggled to take much enjoyment from it. But I had a great time. I had a great time there, and they should be really chuffed, and it gives them that great platform to kick on. And I know they've got new owners in situ. I need to check more about it, but it seems like they're qualified teachers, and I think it's going to be quite similar to EduSport Academy, where you bring players over from France and you give them an education, but they also play football at the same time.
Right, okay. I mean, I don't think any of us are particularly enamoured by EduSport's approach, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes, I suppose.
Yeah. I mean, we've all seen Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, where it's just the Edinburgh are just like stealing children to dig for Sankara stones. Maybe that's what they're... That's what they're trying to do to awaken the spirit of the Kali Ma. We don't know.
Exactly the same.
So that was great from an Edinburgh perspective, but from the Spartans, like I don't think I've actually seen Dougie Samuel interviewed.
No, so I was disappointed at the fact that Michael McIndoe was interviewed. So fair enough. Then I went to try and find anything by Dougie Samuels.
Yeah.
Then I realised, I was like, wait a minute. As you've just said, I don't know if I've ever seen him get interviewed.
Do you know, it's like I feel post-match interviews are really good because you get a good idea. It gives you a good flavour for what the manager's like. It's like, I've never met the guy. I feel more like John McGlynn a wee bit. Just off his post-match interviews, I feel as though, watching the Edinburgh interviews of Michael McIndoe, that's why I've got a bit of a soft spot for Edinburgh, because I've seen his interviews. But I don't think I've heard anything from Dougie Samuel at all. He's the longest serving manager in Scotland, but I've not seen much from him.
I literally went on because I believe I subscribed to every single lower league club on YouTube, and just to double check in case I'd missed it somehow, I went on Spartan specifically to see if they had anything from Samuels, and there was nothing. So no, you're absolutely right, which is odd and just disappointing, I suppose.
I suppose though, Edinburgh did post their highlights in their interview straight onto Twitter.
Yes.
So it's getting more confusing as to, it feels like, when they give you sign up to Hulu Plus to watch this new show, or sign up to Peacock, sign up to Paramount. So I'm paying all this extra money for all these. Just get them into the one place.
I still think in terms of Dougie Samuels, you probably have to go to Spartan's Twitter and their YouTube account. That's probably it.
I would be a wee bit concerned though. We're all bigging up Edinburgh, and we've touched on the Spartans a little bit. I don't know if it's like second season syndrome, because last season, I think maybe out of every club in the lower leagues, they're the one that perhaps outperformed expectation. We had them at mid-table, and they ended up finishing second, third. And somebody will correct me about their league placings, and Shaughan and I will address it on next week's show. But they were really good. You think that this team's going to finish about 6th or 7th. they exceed all expectations, and you expect them to kick on. I mean, I don't think that squad's like particularly like cheaply put together. I don't think guys like Callum Booth and James Cragen and like Cammy Russell and Blair Henderson will be on
Paul Watson.
On cheap money. Paul Watson, I don't think they'll be just playing there for sweetie papers, but I don't think they're getting value for money, and I don't know how Samuel goes about fixing it. I'm not for a second suggesting that he's under pressure or anything like that. I don't think that at all, because he has perhaps more than any other manager in the country just got so much credit in the bank that he'll be at Spartans for a long time. But it's just how you build on what you did last season, and I suppose anything outside of a top 4 finish would be a disappointment. And it already feels like League 2 is beginning to partition off, like where you've got your top 4 teams and then everyone else.
Yeah. But you're right, he has so much credit in the bank, but it'd be good to hear from him every now and again.
Yes, definitely. But great day. Really, really enjoyed it, and went for a coffee with Danny Denham afterwards.
Oh, that's nice. What was he saying to you? Is he okay?
He's fine. He's fine. I think when he was walking, because he stays quite close to Meadowbank, and he's obviously wearing a Spartans tracksuit. Somebody swore at him when he was walking around.
Was that Edinburgh or Spartans fan?
He didn't get in the pitch, so I don't. They can't blame him for not getting the win there. I think it was an Edinburgh fan.
Oh, that's just rude.
Good to catch up with him though. Just up next, Shaughan, Bonnyrigg Rose versus Edinburgh City, and the Spartans taking on Elgin City.
I do think there might be a bit of a kind of after the Lord Mayor show for Edinburgh, so I wouldn't be surprised if actually Bonnyrigg, like I know they're not playing particularly well either, and I think this would be like I know again we've talked about the fact that Edinburgh are quite good and quite fun. I think this will be a terrible game, and Bonnyrigg will sneak it. Yeah,
I think that's one of the benefits about the time. So the 2 times I've seen Edinburgh, one was in Lesser Hampden, which is like probably the best surface, one of the best surfaces in the country, and the other one is synthetic surface. So that's very conducive of the way they want to play football. New Dundas Park, coming up to the winter, not conducive to playing good football.
Bit of a slant.
Let's see how you handle that. Lewis MacArthur. That's probably easy because he just headers balls all day. Spartans versus Elgin.
Spartans versus Elgin, probably. I mean, Elgin seem to draw most games, so let's go for 1-0.
Fair play. Now, Shaughan, we'll take a quick spin through the 4th round of the SPFL Trust Trophy, and we're going to focus on one match in particular, and that is East Kilbride's penalty shootout victory against the holders, Airdrieonians, at the Excelsior. As you mentioned, Jordan McGregor put the Lowland League champions ahead 6 minutes before half-time. Cool finish from about 8 yards out. Gavin Gallagher equalised for the Diamonds late on. The match went to penalties. The penalties went to sudden death. Chris Mockery took the worst penalty kick I think I've ever seen in my entire life.
Terrible.
You know what it looked like the way when he hit it? It was like somebody playing football with like a 3-year-old. You know, you just kick the ball really gently at them so they can control it. Terrible. And David Ferguson tucked his away. So East Kilbride progressed to the next round, and they have got Ayr United at home. So that draw was made earlier today. Now, I think we tend not to mention East Kilbride all that often, or certainly not in any great detail on this podcast, but we were able to talk about them when we did our big lower league preview, because they had met Airdrieonians, the very first game of the season, League Cup group stage tie all the way back in July, and Airdrie won that 8-0. East Kilbride looked terrible in this, so I think that even though the Airdrieonians haven't been fantastic lately, I think they would have seen this as a really good opportunity to get a win under the belts, kick on, but not going very well for them at the moment.
No, I mean, in terms of Airdrie, I know we spoke about them last week in terms of the fact that they are limited in terms of that squad. It feels like they are very much inhibited by the budget. I suppose what held them back even further, and before I get to East Kilbride, but what held them back even further was the fact that Mason Hancock was injured.
Yeah.
And admittedly, I've only seen comments online, the suggestions that he might be out for 6 or 7 weeks. If that is the case, then, I mean, he is probably the one player in that Airdrie squad who, I mean, not just defensively is he good. He's actually probably their best attacking source as well, in terms of attacking from fullback. I mean, based on, I was looking at the updates on Saturday, and I thought first half, judging by the kind of updates from Airdrie, that Kieran Wright was having a good game. Now, to be fair, judging by the highlights that I watched at Airdrie, I am presuming that you're accurate. But I said the majority of the chances in those highlights in the first half certainly was Airdrie, albeit it was kind of half chances. But second half, I mean, East Kilbride pummeled them. Kieran Wright had a very, very good game, and really, East Kilbride, Kilby should have put that game to bed within the 90 minutes. And actually, Airdrie were quite fortunate to take it to penalties.
I think so, yeah. I think it was during the second half. I've got down here, like, they had 3 chances, like John Robertson hitting the post. João Balde had a good chance to set someone up, but went for himself for a shot, which perhaps should have been looked up. And Cammy Elliott did the same in the match as well. I think he could have passed it to John Robertson, but instead tried to go for himself. John Robertson's going off his head at him, and quite right.
Yeah.
But they created really good openings, and weirdly enough, like, Airdrie could have won it at the end. I think it was right. Acknowledged a total smash and grab, but there's Ben Wilson gets put through and shoots wide, and later on at the end, I think it's Wilson again forced a one-handed save from Matthew Connolly in the East Kilbride goal. But just, it's really worrying. I know that Airdrie have a big injury list, like a really, really big injury list. Perhaps more so than most of the clubs. Kind of similar to Dunfermline last season, where you've got so many good players absent. But just you wonder for McCabe, similar to this, maybe to a lesser extent the Spartans, but where you had them pegged to just make up the numbers in the championship to get into 4th place. You raise the expectations, and when you don't meet the expectations, fans do get like, well, what's going on here? And while I don't think it will be the right thing to get rid of McCabe, some people might be thinking, well, maybe we can just do the same, just a different voice. I don't know.
And I mean, I suppose, and maybe this, I mean, maybe Airdrie fans aren't tapping at this, but obviously if you remember that going towards, it might have been September or something last season, and McCabe had said that our aim is to win the league. They might have said that on the BBC, if I remember correctly. But there was a player that right at the start of this season, and I'm sure it was during the League Cup, might have been in the kind of post-match interview of the 8-0 win over East Kilbride. It might have been somebody like Hancock. Certainly somebody was interviewed, and they're like, what is the ambitions this season? And it's like, well, the ambition is absolutely to win the division. And it's like, I suppose ultimately that doesn't really matter. But I suppose if you're telling the fans that is the ambition, and then you're 10th in September and you're losing to East Kilbride and you're struggling to break anybody down or score goals, and you think, geez, the recruitment here is absolutely dreadful, then it probably makes things more difficult, rather than setting out in August and saying, listen, we've only been in the championship a couple of seasons. Ultimately, our ambition here is to stay into the division. Then maybe it would temper expectation. I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't make any difference whatsoever. But if your starting point is our ambition is to win the league, and you're sitting 10th, it probably isn't a great look, and it probably makes things a wee bit more difficult. Yeah, definitely. And I don't know if you saw and I suppose as well, what makes the result even worse. One, there's a number of factors that make this bad. You're on a bad run before, you're the holders of the competition, the team that you beat in 8-0 4 months ago, and the fact there's like 3 divisions between you. It just that result just amplifies everything. Now, no one's season is going to be judged on whether or not they win the SPFL Trust Trophy. You go back the last of the season previously, Hamilton Accies won the SPFL Trust Trophy and were ultimately relegated via the playoffs. So it's like a nice thing to have. And your season will not be defined by whether or not you win this title. However, given all the bad stuff that's going on at Airdrie, the lack of results and the fact they look a bit stodgy, it just is another factor, especially when you bring all those different elements into it. This is a result that they really could have done without. Yeah, absolutely. And as much as it's like nobody really, I think you mentioned it last week, nobody cares about the Challenge Cup until they care. Yeah. So like the final is a day out, for example. But this, like losing to a lowland league side, albeit a very, very good lowland league side in East Kilbride, like you care about that if you're in a championship. That feels very, very embarrassing, regardless of the fact that whether or not it's in the Challenge Cup. So yes, I'm not saying it exerts a lot more pressure on McCabe, but it's not a good look for him.
No, not at all. There's someone else, I don't know if you saw on Saturday night, Simon Ferry, who's East Kilbride assistant manager. He tweeted something out about like how people had really been critical of their approach when the teams met back in July, and said that this result, I can't remember exactly what he said because the tweets have been deleted, but he said something like this vindicates their approach. Since they've won, like they were really putting that, but they tried to play football the right way. They have continued to do that, and this is the rewards that you can go back somewhere where you're embarrassed. You go back 4 months later and ultimately get the win.
I'm not sure that the two things are comparable though. So see if you go back to whenever that game was, like June or July, I thought pound for pound it was one of the worst defensive performances that I have ever seen. Yeah. So. And to be fair, Mick Kennedy touched on it, and I think he said that he regarded it as part of a pre-season, and the players went along back, and
I'm sure he said something. He said something like, "Yes, well, certainly on Twitter, because loads of people were replying to him. He was like, a great result," and folk were replying. The Airdrie fans saying, "Oh, we had 5 players out." I think he said something like, "We'd been back for 2 weeks, and we had a bunch of players missing when we met you the last time." He didn't mention anything to do. They played David Wilson in goals that day. It just goes to show you what happens when you actually put someone that can save shots and pass the ball with his feet, what you want to do.
But I just thought in general it was. I mean, I don't know how many changes there was in that East Kilbride side, but I'm not entirely sure that the two games were comparable in general. But regardless, based on the kind of 10 minutes highlights I watched, I thought East Kilbride looked very, very impressive. And obviously in the past, well, it's the last kind of 18 months or so, we've spoken about the fact that the one thing that does hold Kilby back is their kind of defensive performances. But actually, based on what I saw, I thought they kind of handled a championship side pretty well.
Yeah, very well. And I suppose that it's all like you're going back to that. You don't want to read too much into post-match interviews, but Kennedy's always been very principled, and it's one of those things. The principles look great when they come off, and you look like a bit of a chump when they don't. You think like Brendan Rodgers against Dortmund. Think about that 8-0 win, but there's something to be said about sticking with it. So fair play to them. Fortunately, we have to end this bit on a bit of a sour note, because there was an Airdrie fan has been given, I think it's a lifetime ban that he's been given from Excelsior for racially abusing East Kilbride midfielder Zhao Baldwin. The club acted swiftly. I think it was Monday that they said this fan's been banned, and it goes without saying, but they've done the right thing, and it's shite that the player should have to put up with that. No place in football for it, and just really hope that Zhao Baldi's all right and it doesn't affect him too much, and he can continue to keep on playing for East Kilbride. There was the penalties. This was something I was a bit frustrated by in the match highlights, because when the Ferguson hits the penalty, the players go off and celebrate at the MAGA lot, just for want of a better expression, that play in that bit. And you can see a kind of chubby looking fellow with a gilet. What's it with fans and gilets entering the pitch? He comes sprinting down the wall, opens the gate, runs onto the pitch. But it's almost like there's a force field he can't cross the white line. There's almost something there to stop him from doing it. But then after that, there's like somebody else enters the field, and then it just fades to black. And it would have been interesting to see that spool on. I read on Pine Bovril that I wondered if those incidents were connected with what happened to Baldy, but somebody had said the incident happened down when he was leaving the pitch down towards the tunnel. Even so, both things are unacceptable. You shouldn't be entering the pitch. Just because a player celebrates down in front of you, you can't enter the pitch. That's completely unacceptable. So just a shite way to end what was a pretty unremarkable game of football.
Yeah, I was wondering if I did have a wee look to see if East Kilbride had maybe different highlights that maybe showed a wee bit more at the end of the game, because as you say, they kind of fade to black, and as you would expect, Airdrie don't necessarily want to be showing the fact that one of their fans may have been swinging, for example, at East Kilbride players. But I couldn't see any more. But ultimately, that was just me. I suppose that was just me being nosy. But yeah, a dreadful way to end the game, and just like Airdrie seem to have like a kind of I don't know a tendency for this, and it's like when things happen at Wraith Rovers and somebody misbehaves, I find it mortifying. But it seems to have happened a few times at Airdrie, so I can only imagine how kind of embarrassing it is for kind of Airdrie fans.
Yeah, the club have certainly done the right thing. I mean, that was very prompt after that. I mean, pretty easy to identify the guy and dish out the ban. So hopefully they can move on from that. And as you mentioned there, they've got the game against Partick Thistle to look forward to on Saturday. Is there anything else like from the rest of the fixtures that caught your eye? I mean, not much happened. Full-time sides beat their part-time opponents. Teams higher up the food chain got the better of the sides beneath them. Duncan Ferguson complained about plastic pitches in his post-match interview after Inverness Caledonian Thistle lost at Livingston in penalties. Anything else catch the eye, or is it just like there?
I mean, like, is it Blessing? There was like all three goals, I think, at Ayr, Peterhead. It felt like the keepers were at fault. So Blessing, Oluwayemi, it felt like he was at fault for both at Peterhead. Albeit there was like a difficult camera angle, and the first goal was deflected, but he was at that side of the goal. Certainly, the second goal, I thought it was a fault. And then Harry Stone, I thought was kind of dribbled under him for Peterhead's.
It's becoming a bit of a worry for Ayr United, isn't it? The goalkeeping situation.
A wee bit. I think they've already used. I could be wrong here.
3.
I think it's 4. I think Scotland might already have used 4 goalkeepers this season, so that there is definitely something there in terms of Livingston, Inverness. So I'd paid for the stream. Hadn't realised. In fact, I don't even know if this is allowed. Maybe it's allowed on certain if there's no Barclays, for example. But Livingston put their game. They put their stream on YouTube free. So Livingston Inverness was live on YouTube for everyone. I kind of switched on and I realised that might go to penalties. Literally for maybe, I don't know, from like maybe the 91st minute to the 94th minute, Duncan Ferguson was just screaming abuse at the referee and the linesman for full time. Like, it's not as if it went to, like, it wasn't as if it was Scotland-Hungary. Like, it went to the 101st minute. It was just like maybe the 91st minute. And he was just screaming for full time. And obviously, eventually he got his wish. It went to penalties, and then they lost. but what I would say is, it was, so I'd seen a bit of it, but it was quite a ding dong. Like, both teams made changes, to be fair, but it was a ding dong first half, and it was interesting in terms of, like, Inverness looked good. See that first half, Inverness looked good, and maybe, I don't think for a minute that Duncan Ferguson has learned anything from it, but maybe there's a kernel of an idea vegetating in his head that maybe if he allows that team off the leash, maybe they can harm teams in League One. I don't know. Maybe something to cling to from an Inverness perspective.
Well, there's probably a good chance by the time this podcast is published that my notes will be prophetic and they have gone into administration. It's not like it's not like a big leap though to say that. Now, if I said to you that I think that Green Up Morton are going to go into administration tomorrow, you'd be like, wow, that's a big leap. But this is something there's probably a good chance of it happening. So certainly hope it doesn't. But I suppose it's a good time to wrap up there, Shaughan.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I think that'll do it for us. Yeah, Shaughan and I are going to record a Patreon about 6 lower league signings that have caught the eye so far this season. Is it worth shelling out £2 for, or is it just 2 tired and confused men going through the motions? Send us your Venmo details to find out. But we thoroughly recommend you subscribe to the podcast. There's plenty of great content available. You will not be disappointed, especially if you want to hear about how Craig Fowler's body is beginning to fail him. But we'll go off and record that. And Fowler, obviously, I know you're going to edit this. We wish you well. Hope you're back in the horse. Shaughan, we'll be probably back next week.
No doubt. I
always say that when we're making a view for the terrace, like on the nights before we're making a view for the terrace, I like to have an ice bath. Yeah. I like to do a bit of stretching. I like to do a bit of gooning. My hands are generally quite full. And so when you chuck in having to do all these podcasts, I just ache all the time. I ache mentally and spiritually.
Wait a minute, what's gooning?
Oh, it's wait, I had to look this up. I just wanted to make sure I give you the proper definition. Yeah, gooning at its most basic definition, means acting completely uninhibited while you masturbate or perform pleasure, seemingly losing yourself in the moment and going cross-eyed, often without orgasming at the end.
I'll be honest. See, the night before we recorded this, I normally just read notes about Ray McKinnon.
Yeah, I do that as well. Just while stretching in an ice bath. Save the gooning till I get to my bed. Yeah.
Well, there we are. There we are.
So yeah, Shaughan and I will be back next week. But in the meantime, as you mentioned, there's a full card of SPFL football to get you stuck into this weekend. Please do enjoy your football, but unlike EastEnders Tommy Moon, who started leathering his mum, Kat Slater, please do so respectfully. Great storyline, by the way. EastEnders getting really good just now. Take care, goodbye, and God bless.